Hello, and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. This is the official version of what happened to me almost 2 years ago. I've left out addresses, last names, and anything that could lead people to me, my sister, or anyone else involved. That is not because I want to be mysterious. It is because, even now, I don't fully know what was happening, and some of it is still connected to an open investigation. I've never been the kind of person who obsessed over the paranormal. That was always Sarah's thing. She liked ghost stories, haunted places, strange local legends, anything with a little mystery in it. I used to tease her about it. I used to tell her she could turn a creaking floorboard into a demon if she wanted to, badly enough. But after what happened to me, I don't laugh at those things anymore. Some of the events I'm about to describe were investigated by the Wonderland City Police Department. Some parts still cannot be explained, at least not by any explanation the detectives were willing to give me. I have my own ideas about what happened, but even those feel incomplete. There are gaps, there are questions, there are moments that still sit inside my head like pieces of glass. The worst night of my life happened 5 years before all of this began. It was cold, dark, and raining hard. The smell of wet pavement and soil filled the air. A thick mist rolled across the road so heavy it seemed like even the brightest light could barely cut through it. The red ambulance lights flashed in the dark, appearing and disappearing through the fog like a warning from another world. I remember getting out of my car and walking slowly toward the cluster of flashlights ahead. They looked like little stars gathered together in the rain. I remember seeing the sheriff's face before I understood what he was saying. I remember the sound of the rain hitting everything. The road, the trees, my jacket, the ambulance roof. Then I saw her. My wife, Sarah. They were pulling her from the wrecked car, and her eyes were still open. That is the image that has never left me. Her eyes were open, but she was not looking at me. She was not looking at anyone. She was looking past everything, past the rain, past the road, past the world itself. The sheriff told me she had swerved to avoid an animal. The car hydroplaned and hit a tree. She had been alive long enough to call 911, but not long enough to make it to the hospital. Her last words, according to the dispatcher, were, "I should have hit that squirrel." That sentence still haunts me, not because it sounds dramatic. It doesn't. That is what makes it worse. It was such a small, human thing to say. A thought of regret, a thought of disbelief. A thought spoken by someone who did not know those would be the last words she ever gave the world. My Sarah was gone, and I never really recovered. By the time the strange things began, it was almost a month before the 5th anniversary of her death. September 13th was coming closer, and that date always dragged me back into the worst part of my life. I still thought about her every day, her laugh, her smile, the smell of her hair, the way she would leave fake eyelashes stuck to the bathroom wall when she was too tired to put them away properly. She didn't wear them often, but when she did, she had this lazy habit of peeling them off before bed and sticking them wherever her hand landed. Sometimes I would find them on the mirror, sometimes on the nightstand. When I found them on the bathroom wall, I used to draw little eyes and a smile underneath them just to make her laugh in the morning. I miss those stupid little things more than anything. We had known each other almost our whole lives. We got together senior year of high school. The funny thing is, she had to ask me out because I was apparently too blind to notice she had liked me for years. Once we got together, that was it. We were young, stupid, happy, and completely sure we had found the one thing everyone else spends their life searching for. I proposed on our 3rd anniversary. We had 3 good years of marriage after that. Then one wrong night took everything away. People love to say grief gets easier with time. Maybe it does for some people. For me, it became quieter but not lighter. It sat inside me, it followed me from room to room. Some days I could function, other days I could barely get out of bed. I tried to move on. I really did. A few months before this started, I went on a date with a woman named Mallory. She was kind, smart, funny, and honestly more patient with me than I deserved. The date went well. Too well, maybe. When it ended, she seemed excited about seeing me again. Then I told her I couldn't. The look on her face nearly broke me. I apologized over and over, but I knew that didn't fix anything. My friends told me I was destroying myself by staying loyal to a ghost. They said Sarah would have wanted me to live. I told them I was more comfortable alone. That was a lie. I just wanted Sarah. My sister Jess was the only person who never gave up on me. She is 3 years younger than me, but we look so much alike that strangers sometimes assume we're twins. Growing up, we fought constantly. We were loud, stubborn kids who could turn anything into a war. But as adults, we became close in a way I'm grateful for every day. Jess was my angel during those 5 years. She checked in on me, she dragged me out when I wanted to disappear, she made jokes when I needed them, and shut up when I didn't. She knew when to push and when to let me sit in silence. One evening, she decided I needed to go to a fair a couple of towns over. "Come on," she said, punching my shoulder like we were kids again. "We're gonna smoke a couple joints, get pizza, ride the Gravitron, and spin that depression right out of you medieval style." "Fine," I said, "but the pizza is probably the thing that's getting spun out of me. That's why we have the joints, dumbass," she said, shoving me toward her Jeep. "Now get in." Later that night, the fair was alive with noise and color. Lights buzzed above us in every shade imaginable. Machines whirred and screamed. Kids ran past with cotton candy and glow sticks. The air smelled like fried dough, grease, weed, sugar, and rain on old pavement. For the first time in a while, I almost felt like a normal person. Then Jess stopped so suddenly I nearly ran into her. "Oh my God," she shouted. "A psychic!" I followed her gaze to a purple tent tucked between a funnel cake stand and a booth where people were throwing balls at stacked bottles. "You know she's not actually going to tell you the future, right?" I said. Jess rolled her eyes. "Still worth a try. Maybe if we're lucky, she'll tell you that one day you'll gain a sense of curiosity." She took off toward the tent, and I followed reluctantly, apologizing to everyone she shoved past. Inside, the air was thick with smells, dragon's blood incense, sage, cigarette smoke, perfume, and something that was probably weed. Crystals, tarot cards, candles, little statues, and cheap jewelry covered the front tables. It all looked like something designed for tourists who wanted a story to tell when they went home. In the back sat the psychic. She wore a purple robe and had dark hair streaked with gray. She looked older, but not weak. Her voice was raspy, the kind of voice that sounded like decades of cigarettes had sanded it down. "Welcome, welcome to my mysterious place," she said, waving one hand. "Tell your future, I will to your face." Before she could even finish saying, "What is—" the psychic cut her off. "You will meet one of the Jonas brothers in a Chipotle bathroom. But I was going to ask your name." "I know," the psychic said, "but I figured I'd give you your fortune instead. No need to thank me. Just give me $20 and make your way downtown, missy." Jess looked annoyed, confused, and slightly impressed all at once. Eventually, she pulled out a 20, slapped it on the table, and stood. "I'm getting a soda," she told me. "Meet me at the restaurant when you're done." I was about to tell the psychic I was leaving too, but before I could speak, she grabbed my hand. Her whole face changed. The playful act disappeared. Her eyes softened, but they also filled with concern. She looked straight into me. Not at me, into me. Then she whispered, "I have a message from Sarah. She says she will always be there for you, John." The words hit me like cold water. I pulled my hand away. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I have to go." She only opened the flap of the tent and said, "I'll see you soon, John." I left fast. I found Jess and told her I wanted to go home. I didn't tell her why. Not then. For a while, I tried to forget about it. I couldn't. A couple of weeks later, I had the first dream. I was standing in a golden meadow beneath an evening sun. The light shone across the grass, turning everything warm and red at the edges. In the distance, I saw a lone oak tree beside an old moss-covered stone wall. And under the tree sat Sarah. She wore a white gown that caught the sunset and seemed to glow scarlet around her. She looked exactly the way I remembered her when she was alive. Beautiful, peaceful, waiting. I ran toward her. At first, the grass was easy to move through. Then it grew thicker, higher, heavier. It wrapped around my legs and slowed me down. I pushed through it, bounding and stumbling like a young deer still learning how to use its body. But no matter how fast I moved, I made no progress. Sarah, the tree, and the wall stayed the same distance away. It was as if the whole meadow stepped backward every time I stepped forward. I fought through the grass until my chest burned. I kicked, stomped, sprinted, thrashed, and forced myself onward. Finally, I broke through the thickest part and reached the oak. But Sarah was gone. Then I realized I was on the wrong side of the tree. "You're on the wrong side, dumbass," I muttered to myself in the dream, almost laughing. I hurried around the trunk. Then I woke up. John. I heard my name in Sarah's voice. Half asleep, I mumbled, "Sarah, come back to bed." I rolled into my pillow, still caught between dream and waking. Then I heard footsteps. Kip, tap, tip-tap, small, light steps moving across the room. A warmth touched the bottom of my calf. It slid slowly up my leg, then over my back. It grew larger, like a warm blanket of soft skin wrapping around me. A small arm slipped around my body and pulled me close. Then came the smell. Lilac and lavender. Sarah. I relaxed before I could think. My body knew her. My grief wanted her. For one sweet second, I was ready to fall asleep in her arms. Then the truth hit me like lightning. Sarah is dead. I jolted upright. The bed beside me was empty. Dawn was just beginning to creep through the blinds, a dull blue light filling the room. I stared at the place where Sarah used to sleep, where she used to open her eyes and smile when she realized I was awake too. Nothing was there. The clock read 5:30. "Fuck," I whispered. "I'm not getting back to sleep." I got up and made the strongest coffee I could. Before I even finished the first cup, nausea hit me so hard I barely made it to the toilet. I threw up until my stomach had nothing left to offer. Afterward, I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like hell. I had work in half an hour. I went anyway because staying in that house felt worse. As I closed the front door behind me, I heard something inside. Patter, patter. The same small footsteps moved across the kitchen floor behind me. I froze. Then I told myself I was half asleep, stressed, grieving, dreaming with my eyes open. I got in my car and drove to work. Work was fine, or as fine as work can be when you're 29 and frying chicken in a gas station kitchen for $16 an hour. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. Before that, I had worked in mental health. That's the ironic part. I spent years helping people get through pain, but when I needed help myself, the people I worked with threw me to the wolves. I missed helping people. I missed watching someone grow into who they wanted to be. But I could not go back to that office. Not after seeing what people were really like when compassion became inconvenient. When I got home that night, I finally showered. The warm water helped. It loosened the muscles in my back and shoulders. I was so tired I could have fallen asleep standing under the water. When I got out and wiped the steam from the mirror, I noticed something on my skin. A light pink scratch started near my right shoulder, ran down my arm, crossed my stomach, traveled along my leg, and ended near the bottom of my calf. It was strange, but I actually felt relieved. Maybe the dream had been caused by sleeping in a bad position. Maybe I had scratched myself somehow, and my mind turned the sensation into Sarah touching me. That was an explanation. I needed one. Later, when I lay down to sleep, I heard knocking. Rat-a-tat-tat. Rat-a-tat-tat. I sat up, annoyed. It sounded like someone was downstairs at the front door. I got out of bed and went down, already irritated that someone would come knocking so late. But no one was at the door. Then I heard it again. Rat-a-tat-tat. Rat-a-tat-tat. This time, I could tell where it was coming from. The washing machine. I walked toward it slowly. For a second, I tried to convince myself I had started laundry and forgotten. My brain almost created the memory for me, imagining myself throwing work clothes into the washer earlier. But when I opened it, I froze. Inside was Sarah's wedding gown. I stood there, unable to breathe. Then from the basement came a loud bang. I went still. Every part of me screamed not to go near that door, but I did. I approached the basement, opened the door as quietly as I could, and stared into the darkness below. My hand reached for the light switch. Then a soft, familiar whisper floated up from the dark. Psst, dummy. Get down here and keep the light off. I have a surprise. I'll use the switch down here, don't worry. I slammed the door shut. Nope. Fuck that. I locked the basement door, ran outside, got into my car, and called the police from the driveway. I didn't tell them the full truth, of course. What was I supposed to say? My dead wife was whispering from my basement and asking me to come down with the lights off. They would have taken me away. So I told them I heard people breaking into my house and moving around in the basement. I said I locked them in. 2 officers arrived a few minutes later. Their names were Chuck and Ross. Chuck was big, grizzled, and calm in the way old cops sometimes are when they've seen too much. Ross was shorter, nervous-looking, with a thin voice that reminded me of a weasel. They searched the house, then went down into the basement. I heard one of them call out, "Hey, Chuck, check this out." Where do you think they could have gone? Not many exits besides the 2 doors, and both were locked when I checked outside. Whoever it was must have scattered like scared partridge. When they came back upstairs, Chuck leaned against the counter. "Looks like some kid's pulling a sick prank," he told me. "Small towns are like that. Word spreads. People get bored." Dr. Ross kept looking toward the basement door like he didn't fully believe that. Chuck said they didn't find anyone, only crude graffiti downstairs. He suggested I change my locks because whoever got in might have had a key. After they left, curiosity got the better of me. I went to the basement to see the graffiti. The air became cold halfway down the stairs. I stopped at the bottom, unable to move, staring at the wall. Written in dark red letters were the words, "I'm in the house, come find me. Less than 3. Even though the police said the house was clear, I left and spent the night at Jess's place. I slept better than I had in weeks. But that peace did not last. 5 days later, the banging started again. Bam, 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 every night. I called officers Chuck and Ross more than once, but each time they found nothing. No forced entry, no person, no new graffiti. By the 4th visit, I could see they were beginning to think I was losing my mind. Before leaving that day, Chuck handed me a card for a local therapist who specialized in PTSD. "I know the signs," he said. "I've been there myself. It could help. If things got bad, I should call 911, but otherwise I needed to think about getting help. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was insane." That night, I sat on the couch exhausted, trying to understand what was happening. Then the banging started again. Bam, bam, bam. Something in me snapped. I ran downstairs, threw open the basement door, turned on the light, grabbed a vase from the shelf, and hurled it down the steps. "Shut the fuck up," I screamed. "Leave, or the next thing getting knocked against the wall is your skull." The banging stopped. For the first time in almost a week, there was silence. I locked the basement door and went upstairs. Exhaustion hit me all at once. I collapsed into bed and fell asleep. The meadow returned. Again, I ran through the thick grass toward the oak tree, fighting to reach Sarah. Again, it felt like an eternity before I finally reached the trunk. This time, I hurried around it, ready to see her, ready to hold her, ready to hear that everything would be okay. But what waited on the other side was not my Sarah. It was her corpse. Most of her flesh had rotted away. What remained was brown, shriveled, and clinging to bone. Flies swarmed over her, fighting over the pieces left behind. The smell was unbearable, a mix of vinegar, decay, and cheap perfume. Only her eyes were untouched. They stared at me and past me, just like the night she died. Then her decayed hand shot out and grabbed my leg. Her nails dug deep into my calf with impossible strength. She pulled me down, climbed on top of me, and leaned in for a kiss. She had no lips, only rotten strips of flesh hanging in front of her teeth. I tried to scream. She bit into my bottom lip. I woke up to the sound of knocking. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. Blood poured from my lip. I ran to the bathroom and turned on the light. The wound was real. Then I saw my leg. 4 deep scratches circled my calf, right where she had grabbed me in the dream. "That's impossible," I whispered. Then I remembered what the psychic had said. "Sarah says she will always be there for you, John." Those words echoed in my mind until I knew what I had to do. I had to find that medium. For the next couple of weeks, things became calmer, though calm is probably the wrong word. I still heard footsteps at night. Sometimes there was banging. Sometimes I thought I heard Sarah's voice trying to speak through the walls, though I could never understand the words. The nightmares continued. The strangest part was that I began getting used to it. In a sick, lonely way, I even found it comforting. I started wondering if maybe our love had crossed some boundary death was never meant to stop. Maybe Sarah had come back because she loved me. Maybe this was what always there meant. Or maybe I was losing my mind. Jess was worried about me. When I finally told her, Sarah was haunting me. We were sitting in a Chipotle parking lot. She laughed at first, thinking I was making some dark joke after the break-in. When she realized I was serious, her face changed. She begged me to stay with her for a while. I told her I would call if I felt like I couldn't stay at the house. That was another lie. Eventually, I found an ad in the newspaper. Madame Deina Blaine, psychic, occultist. I called her and asked her to come to my house. When she arrived, the first thing she said was, "Home visits are $150 sugar up front. No refunds." Then she added, "Extra work costs extra, and I don't do nothing below the waist." I stared at her, more horrified by that sentence than by the possibility of my dead wife haunting me. "I called because my dead wife is haunting my house," I said. "I need help." Deina stifled a laugh. "I know, sugar. Just messing with you. Stay here. I'll walk around and see what's happening." I explained everything. Then I waited in the kitchen while she moved through the house, muttering and chanting in a language that sounded suspiciously like nonsense. She went room to room, waving smoke, touching walls, and listening at doorways. When she returned, she looked calm. "I don't feel anything unusual upstairs," she said. "Only place left is the basement. Should be a piece of cake." She disappeared down the basement stairs. The house went silent. It could not have been more than a minute, but it felt much longer. Then Deina came sprinting back up the stairs. She slammed the basement door, pressed her back against it, and wiped at her neck like something had touched her there. Her face had gone pale. Sweat ran down her temples. Her blue eyes flicked between me and the door, wide with terror. Then she looked directly at me. "You can keep your money, kid," she said. "All I'm allowed to say is this. There is someone here, and you need to leave now." Before I could ask anything, she ran out of the house, got in her car, and peeled out of the driveway. The second the front door closed behind her, the power went out. The house erupted. Banging came from every direction. Walls, floors, ceiling, basement. A scream tore through the darkness, human and inhuman at the same time. filled with rage, pain, and something like grief twisted into hatred. I took Davina's advice. Using my phone flashlight, I packed a small bag as quickly as I could. The entire time, the banging and screaming grew louder. It felt like the house was trying to shake itself apart around me. When I reached my car, I could still hear it, even after I started driving, even after I reached the end of my long driveway. Only when I turned onto the road toward Jess's house did the sound fade. But the screaming stayed in my head. How could Sarah be capable of that? The next day was September 13th. The anniversary of her death. Despite Jess begging me not to, I went back to the house. I had lost my wedding ring. I don't know how. I never took it off. It meant more to me than anything I owned. Aside from Sarah's wedding gown, it was the only thing I still had from her, since her parents had taken most of her belongings after she died. Jess wanted to come with me. I refused. I don't know what's there, I told her. I don't want it hurting you. The worry in her eyes stayed with me as I left. When I entered the house, I almost collapsed. Every room had been destroyed. Furniture broken, dishes shattered, photos torn apart, appliances damaged, drawers emptied, clothes scattered. Everything I owned was ruined, and the walls were covered in writing. Dark maroon words, like dried blood smeared by hand. We will be together for eternity. I want to crawl inside you and live in you forever. Marry me again. Not even death will stop our love. Am I still pretty? I'm in the house. Come find me. I know you're coming back. My whole body went cold. I knew I would never find the ring in that mess. Then I saw it, sitting on the kitchen table, waiting for me. I stepped carefully over broken glass and debris. I reached for it, then everything went black. When I came to, I was in my bedroom. I could barely breathe. I could not move. I was not tied down, but my body would not obey me. My eyes darted around the room, adjusting slowly to dim candlelight. I was lying on my bed. A woman stood nearby in a white gown. I could not see her face clearly, but I knew who it was. "Sarah?" I whispered. "Shh," she said softly. "Don't speak. It'll hurt." She climbed onto the bed and took my hand in hers. "Did you miss me, baby?" she asked. "I missed you. I missed everything about you." She kissed me. At first, it was sweet, warm, familiar. For a moment, all the years of pain and loneliness seemed to melt away. Memories rushed through me. Our first kiss, her smile, the way she pulled me close when she wanted to feel safe. Then pain exploded through my face. Crunch. She bit into my bottom lip. Blood filled my mouth. I tried to scream, but only a weak sound came out. I tried to push her away, but I could move nothing except my eyes. She pulled back, chewing. "You taste better than I imagined," she said. Then she bit into my stomach. I was trapped inside my own body while she fed on me. When she leaned in again, I thought she would bite me. Instead, she forced something into my mouth with long, sharp fingers. A chunk of me. The metallic taste of blood filled my throat. The texture made me gag, but my body swallowed without permission. Tiny hairs scraped down my throat. "There's nothing you can do," she said. "You are mine." Then she laughed. She told me she was going downstairs to get salt, maybe ketchup. Maybe she would keep making me eat myself raw. She said I was under her control and could not go anywhere. Then she left the room. I lay there, helpless, trying to move one toe. One toe would be enough. If I could move that, maybe I could work my way back into my body. Then I heard a crash. Bam, bam, bam. The sound came from the stairs, then silence. I waited for Sarah to come back. She did not. An hour passed, then another. I thought she was toying with me, that any second she would appear in the doorway, ready to finish what she started. But nothing moved downstairs. After several more agonizing hours, dawn began to creep through the blinds. With the soft blue morning light came a little movement in my body. First my toes, then my legs, then my hands. As soon as I could move, I grabbed my phone from the pile of clothes on the floor and called the police. They told me to get outside if I could. I slowly made my way down the stairs. That was when I saw her at the bottom. At first, I thought it was Sarah. Then, I saw the face. Mallory, the woman I had gone on one date with months earlier. Her neck was broken. She was wearing Sarah's wedding dress. I stood there, unable to understand what I was seeing. When the police arrived, they said Mallory had been pushed over the railing. It could not have been an accident. Someone had lifted her or thrown her. They called an ambulance for me because of my injuries. Then 2 men in dark suits arrived. FBI, they spoke to the sheriff first, then came over to me. They told me my house was being seized as evidence in an ongoing homicide investigation. They promised I would get it back eventually, with the damage repaired. Then they asked if I had somewhere to go. My sisters, I said. As the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance, my mind raced. Why did Mallory do this? How did she get into the house? Who pushed her? What happened to her out there? Then I remembered what Deina had said at the fair. Sarah says she will always be there for you, John. The ambulance door is closed. Outside, the red lights flashed through the wet morning air, reminding me of another night, another ambulance, another impossible loss. The house disappeared from view as we drove away, but then I heard her voice inside my head. Not Mallory's. Sarah's, soft, close, almost like she was sitting beside me. I will always be here for you, John. I still remember the first time I ever saw a dead body. I was young then. Young enough that death was still something I only understood from movies, stories, and the quiet way adults lowered their voices when someone's name came up after a long illness. I knew people died. Everyone knows that, even children. But knowing it is different from seeing it. Knowing it is different from standing in a crowded courtyard while a woman who used to smile at you lies completely still near the gate, her body already turning into something separate from the person you knew. She lived on the ground floor of our building with her 3 daughters. Our family lived upstairs. My father was the landlord, so everyone in the building knew us, and everyone came to our house when there was a problem. The woman's name was Aplama. She was not rich, and neither were her daughters. They came and went through our house often, sometimes to borrow something, sometimes to return something, sometimes just because my mother called them in and gave them food. My mother had a soft heart for them. She said they reminded her of people who had nobody to hold them properly. Aplama's daughters were always moving around the building, sometimes laughing loudly, sometimes arguing with each other, sometimes running errands, sometimes sitting near our kitchen while my mother packed leftovers for them. Their voices were part of the house in those days. I was so used to hearing them that I noticed the silence only after it was gone. They had a cat named Ronnie. Ronnie was not really ours, but she visited our house so often that I sometimes felt she belonged to us too. She was a quiet cat with careful paws and bright eyes, the kind of cat that looked at you like she understood things you didn't. Aplama's daughters never allowed her outside the building. They believed if Ronnie ever went out into the streets, she would lose her way and never return. I used to laugh at that. Cats always found their way, I thought. I did not understand then that some things, once lost, only return if someone brings them back. Aplama was strange, but not in a frightening way at first. She had the kind of face that seemed older than her body, and her eyes always looked as though they were focused on something far behind you. She sometimes read palms for the women in the building. Some people treated it like a joke, but others listened carefully when she spoke. One afternoon, she took my mother's hand and traced the lines with the tip of one finger. I remember her sitting quietly for a long moment before saying, my mother would have 4 children. My mother laughed because at that time it seemed unlikely. But later, the prediction came true. That made everyone speak about Aplama differently. Not openly, not seriously, but in the corners of rooms, in lowered voices, people would say she had sight. They said she knew things before they happened. They said she could see shadows in a person's future. One day, curious and excited, I held out my own hand to her. Read mine, I said. I expected her to smile. I expected her to say something silly. Maybe that I would become rich, or travel far away, or marry someone kind. I expected a story because that was what palm reading felt like to a child. But when Aplama took my hand, her expression changed. The smile faded from her face. She looked at my palm for a long time. Too long. Her fingers tightened slightly around my wrist, and her eyes moved over the lines as if they had disappeared beneath her gaze. Then she whispered, "I see nothing but smoke." I pulled my hand away. I didn't understand what she meant, but the way she said it made my stomach feel cold. I remember rubbing my palm against my shirt afterward as if I could wipe away whatever she had seen there. Not long after that, she died. The day it happened began like any other day. We children were running up and down the building stairs, playing some game I don't even remember now. Our feet slapped against the steps. Our voices echoed through the stairwell. We shouted and laughed and pushed past each other, full of that careless energy children have when they do not know a day is about to become important. But each time we passed the ground floor, something felt wrong. There was no sound from Aplama's house. No daughters talking, no metal dishes clanging, no Ronnie meowing, no movement behind the curtain at the door, just silence. At first, we didn't care. Children notice things but do not always understand them. We kept running. By evening, the building changed. A crowd gathered near the gate. People came from the street, from nearby houses, from upstairs rooms. Their voices rose and overlapped. Someone shouted for water. Someone else pushed through the crowd. Women began crying before I even knew why. I slipped between two adults and saw her. Aplama was lying near the gate. Her body was stretched out on the ground, her red sari twisted around her legs, one arm resting at an unnatural angle. Her face looked strangely peaceful, but also empty. It was the first time I understood that a person could be there and not there at the same time. A man knelt beside her and checked her pulse. The moment he spoke, her daughters screamed. I will never forget that sound. It rose through the air like something tearing. The three girls threw themselves toward their mother, crying and calling her name. Adults held them back, then let them go, then held them again because no one knew what to do with grief that wild. My father, being the landlord, took responsibility for the funeral arrangements. I watched everything from a distance, half hidden behind my mother's sari. I did not want to look, but I could not stop looking. They laid Aplama on a wooden bed. Her daughters moved around her, sobbing and touching her face, her hands, her feet. Then one of them took several leaves and pushed them into Aplama's mouth. I remember my father asking, "Why are you doing that?" "Until she is cremated, she will remain hungry." That sentence stayed with me. I did not fully understand it then, but I understood enough to be afraid. Hungry? Dead and hungry? The words did not belong together, and yet the daughter said them with complete certainty. Then they placed cotton in Aplama's nose. I stared at it. The white cotton looked too bright against her face, too clean, too ordinary for something so final. After that, they carried her away to be burned. In all the chaos of the funeral, Ronnie disappeared. Nobody noticed at first. There were too many people, too many voices, too much crying. The daughters were taken away with relatives, and the house on the ground floor was locked. By the next day, the daughters had decided to leave the building for good. They said since their mother was gone, there was no reason to stay. My mother tried to convince them to remain for a few days, at least until they were calmer, but they shook their heads. Their eyes were swollen, their movements were quiet and broken. They packed their things quickly, and by evening, they were gone. Just like that, the ground floor became empty. But it did not feel empty. That was the problem. After they left, the whole building changed. Before, the ground floor had been full of life. The daughters laughing, the smell of food, Ronnie's soft meows, Aplama's slow voice. Now there was only the locked gate and the darkness behind it. The air near their door grew cold, even in the heat. The hallways seemed darker there than anywhere else. When we children land downstairs, we stopped laughing as we passed that floor. If we were together, we would run past as a group, trying to reach the next flight of stairs before fear caught us. If one of us had to pass alone, we walked quickly with our heads down, too scared to look toward the locked gate. Sometimes we saw a shadow there. Not clearly, never clearly. Just something standing near the door or moving behind the grill, even though the house was locked and empty. If we looked directly, it was gone. But if we looked from the corner of our eyes, something seemed to be there, waiting. We searched for Ronnie for days. At night, some of us went outside with torches, calling her name down the street. Ronnie, Ronnie. Sometimes we saw a cat moving in a drain or sitting under a parked scooter, and our hearts would jump. But it was always another cat, a stranger cat, never Ronnie. I remember feeling guilty. She had belonged to that house, and now the house was empty. Maybe she had run away in fear during the funeral. Maybe she was lost somewhere, hungry and scared, unable to find her way back. The daughters had always said she would lose her way if she went outside. Maybe they had been right. At night, my grandmother sometimes came to visit us. She did not like that my father had rented the ground floor to Aplama and her daughters. She said many things I did not understand then and do not agree with now, but as a child, her words frightened me. One night, while sitting with my father, she said, "You should not have rented to people of another faith." But she continued, "Whenever I pass their floor, I feel someone inside is trying to open the locked door." Those words entered my mind and refused to leave. Someone inside, trying to open the door. That night, I lay awake for a long time, imagining fingers pressing from the other side of Aplama's locked gate. I imagined the bolt shaking silently. I imagined Ronnie trapped inside, crying. I imagined Aplama lying on that wooden bed with leaves in her mouth, hungry until the fire reached her. I told myself my grandmother was only trying to scare us. But then the tapping started. The first night it happened, everyone was asleep. I woke thirsty and went quietly to the kitchen for water. The house was dark except for a faint light from the street coming through the window. I filled a glass and began drinking. That was when I heard it tap, 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 a soft sound on the kitchen wall. I froze with the glass halfway to my mouth. For a moment, I thought it was a lizard or a rat. Then it came again. Tap, 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 slow and deliberate. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. "Who's there?" I shouted. The house remained silent. Then I heard it. Meow. My heart jumped. "Ronnie?" I whispered. "Is that Ronnie outside?" I ran to the gate and pulled the curtain aside, expecting to see the cat waiting there, thin and frightened, finally returned. But there was nothing outside except a few fallen leaves scattered near the entrance. Then the smell reached me, sweet, thick, terrible, burning meat. Not the normal smell of cooking meat, not food. This was heavier, oily, and sour underneath. It coated my throat and made my eyes water. I backed away from the gate, suddenly too scared to call Ronnie's name again. The next morning, I told no one. I was afraid my father would scold me for breaking the glass. I was afraid my mother would say I had dreamed it. And most of all, I was afraid someone would ask what I had smelled because I did not want to say it out loud. The next night, it happened again. Everyone had gone to sleep. I stayed awake longer than I should have, lying under my blanket and listening to the building settle around me. I told myself I was not waiting for the sound, but I was. Sometime late in the night, I heard tapping at the gate, not the kitchen wall this time. The front gate. Tap, tap. I sat up, holding my breath. I wanted to wake my father, but the fear of being scolded stopped me. Children are strange that way. Even when real fear is standing outside the door, the fear of an angry parent can still feel bigger. So I got out of bed and walked quietly toward the gate. The house was dark. My feet felt cold against the floor. I could hear my own breathing. When I reached the curtain, I stopped. "Who is it?" I whispered. From outside came a voice. Meow, not a person's voice. Ronnie. It sounded exactly like her. My hands began to shake. Then the smell returned. Burning flesh, sweet and suffocating. It seemed to push through the gate before anything else, filling my nose and throat until I felt like I might vomit. Still, I reached for the bolt. My fingers were trembling so badly that the metal clicked against the gate. I slid it open slowly. Then I moved the curtain aside. A woman stood outside. Her face was covered with a veil, a gun hat, pulled low so I could not see her features. In her arms, she held Ronnie. For a moment, all my fear disappeared. Ronnie was alive. Her fur looked dusty, but she was alive. Her eyes were wide and shining, and the moment she saw me, she gave a soft, tired meow. The woman held her out to me. She was lost, the woman said. Her voice was dry and low, but familiar enough to make my blood turn cold. I took Ronnie automatically. She was warm, heavier than I expected, and she pressed herself against my chest as if she had been waiting for me. Then the woman's veil slipped. I saw her face. Leaves were stuffed inside her mouth. Dry leaves pressed between her lips, pushing her cheeks outward. White cotton filled her nostrils. Her eyes had rolled back into her head so that only the pale whites showed. Her skin looked stretched and gray under the red edge of the sari. It was Aplama. I could not scream. I could not move. She turned away from me and began walking downstairs. With every step, thin wisps of smoke rose from her body. At first, they curled gently from her shoulders and hair, like steam. Then they thickened, growing darker. By the time she reached the bottom of the stairs, the entire ground floor was filling with black smoke. The smell became unbearable, burning flesh, burning hair. The air grew suddenly hot, so hot that sweat ran down my back and soaked through my shirt. My hands tightened around Ronnie, and she dug her claws into my skin, but I still could not move. Aplama reached the locked gate of her old house. For one moment, she stood before it. Then the smoke swallowed her. I don't remember how long I stood there. I only remember waking later on the floor with Ronnie curled against my chest, purring softly. When my family found me in the morning, they shouted and asked what had happened. I tried to tell them, but the words came out broken. My father checked the gate. It was locked. The ground floor was empty. There was no woman in a red sari. No smoke, no fire. But the smell remained. Even my father noticed it. He said nothing. Ronnie stayed with us after that. She is still with us today, older now, slower, but alive. My mother says it is a miracle that she came back. My father refuses to speak about the night I found her. My grandmother says some debts are paid in ways we cannot understand. I do not know what I believe. But sometimes, Ronnie sits near the locked gate on the ground floor and meows softly, not loudly. Not the way cats cry for food or attention. It is quieter than that. Almost like she is answering someone. Sometimes I stand at the stairs and listen. When Ronnie meows, something behind the locked gate taps once. Then again, then again. Even after all these years, whenever I pass that floor, I still smell it. Faint at first, then stronger if I stay too long. Burning meat. Smoke. Leaves. Sometimes, in the mornings, we find dry leaves scattered outside the locked door, even when the hallway has been swept clean the night before. Nobody knows where they come from. Nobody admits to seeing them fall. And sometimes, late at night, when the whole building is silent and the air grows heavy, I hear laughter from the ground floor. 3 women laughing. Soft at first, then louder. Then joined by a 4th voice, older and deeper, with something dry and crackling inside it. Whenever that happens, Ronnie sits at the top of the stairs and stares down into the dark. She never goes closer. And neither do I. Story 3. We could go deeper into the history here, but only the most recent accounts are truly plentiful, or at least they still have evidence attached to them. The most notorious one is the 2016 Cranbrook police incident that took place on June 25th. Before I retell it, I need to warn you about something. After a lot of digging, I was only able to watch the recording one time. So what I'm giving you is not a perfect transcript. It's my notes from that single viewing, supported by what I remember clearly. I'm sorry in advance. I've tried to make it readable. The file itself had heavy access restrictions, even though it had basically been left to rot deep in a database among thousands of other folders. The video wasn't cut properly either. The first 4 minutes were just darkness. 8:04 p.m. The body-worn camera shows 2 officers driving through the outskirts of town on a routine patrol. The neighborhood is newish, a development area where most of the houses are the same size and shape, with an occasional bigger 2-story house mixed in. A lot of the homes look unfinished or recently built. For about 2 minutes, the officers sit in silence. The driver, later identified as Officer McLean, starts softly humming some country song. At some point, the car radio turns on by itself, or at least it sounds like it does, and the dispatcher comes through right after. Officer McLean? He's in the driver's seat. His voice is calm, but the calm feels practiced. 140 Dunstan Street. Elderly Mrs. Chloe of 144 Dunstan Street reported violent sounds coming from the house. Copy. Heading to the location. 8:09 p.m., the police car parks in front of 140 Dunstan. 2 other vehicles are already there, plus the homeowner's Toyota in the driveway. All cars appear locked and empty. The officers step onto the sidewalk and look around. The street is deserted. More than half the houses are still under construction. Even the ones that look finished show almost no sign of people living in them. No yard furniture, no toys, no lights, no movement. It looks like a neighborhood waiting to become real, like bare gray shells under a hot sky. 140 Dunstan stands out anyway. It looks done, not just built, but lived in. A proud lone marker in a place that still feels unfinished. The officers ring the doorbell. Nothing. They ring again. Still nothing. That's when the sound becomes clearly audible on the recording. Not 1 scream, not 2. A non-stop flood of screaming, high and low, adult and child, layered together like a crowd being torn apart. It does not pause. 8:11 p.m. McLean radios in. Robbins and McLean at 140 Dunstan. We request backup. We confirm loud screams from the house. Dispatch responds that 2 other officers are on patrol nearby and will arrive in about 8 minutes. Until then, they're told to follow emergency entry protocol. Entry is allowed. The 2 officers knock again. The screams continue without changing. Then they start checking for another way in. 8:13 p.m., Robbins tests the windows. They're all locked. Curtains are neatly drawn. As a last resort, he moves toward the backyard. Charles, Robbins says. This one is not closed. He's at a back door. It's unlocked. Both men position themselves, firearms ready. Robbins' hands are shaking slightly. McLean is clearly trying to keep his composure steady, like he knows Robbins is watching him for cues. Okay, McLean says, going in. They move into the backyard slowly. The yard feels strangely empty. The grass is cut perfectly. There are no plants, no garden, no decorations. Just a neat lawn boxed in by a tall white fence that isolates the property from the rest of the block. The screaming is louder here, so loud it almost clips the audio. It sounds like an entire crowd, children and adults, suffering at once. McLean pauses, head tilted slightly, and says something that stuck with me. You hear it, Robbins? It's the same screams, I guess, repeating. Like a loop. Like the sound isn't responding to them being there. Like it's not reacting to anything happening in real time. They continue toward the only obvious activity area, white plastic tables and chairs, the kind you buy cheaply at Walmart. As they step closer, the ground and furniture come into focus, and that's when the video becomes hard to watch. The grass is splattered with red, not a small amount, enough that it looks sprayed. The closer the chairs are to the source of the screams, the more soaked they are. Some chairs look like someone sat there and bled into them without standing up, but there's no sign of a fight, no broken things. No scattered weapons, no overturned tables. Instead, it looks like a party. Cupcakes, juice boxes, pizza slices still set at the seats, red and purple balloons tied in places, drooping slightly, but still inflated. A stack of brightly wrapped presents sits on one table, piled neatly like someone cared. And right there, near the food, McLean spots a small audio recorder. Not a professional one, a kid's recorder. Pink plastic with a little pony on top. Still partially wrapped in red tape like it was a birthday gift, McLean presses the big red button. Every scream stops immediately. The backyard falls into dead silence. Not quieter, not fading. It stops like someone cut power to the world. In the silence, you can hear the officers breathing. You can hear their boots on grass. You can even hear the faint tone of the police radio. McLean calls it in. McLean on location. Code 204. Signs of homicide in the backyard. A lot of blood. About a dozen civilians might be injured. Dispatch confirms medical units are on the way and tells them to hold position until backup arrives, then enter the house and locate residents or intruders. McLean replies, "Copy." The silence in the backyard feels heavier than the screaming ever did. Robbins mutters something weird, like his brain is trying to avoid what he's seeing. "Do you think adults ate pizza too?" McLean turns his head. "What?" Robbins repeats it, sounding half distracted, half serious. "There is pizza on every chair. Do you think the adults ate it too?" Robbins says he'd buy something more interesting. McLean says he'd eat with the kids. They stop talking. The silence is too much. Robbins tries to ask if anything like this has ever happened in their town. McLean answers no. Robbins tries to bring up some other violent incident McLean apparently told him about before. McLean shuts him down sharply and tells him to watch the windows and stop being an idiot. 8:20 p.m., the radio comes alive again. Two other officers, Truss and Curls, have arrived. They ask what the next steps are. McLean tells them, 2 go inside, 2 stay outside watching. One of them will stay in front. Then Robbins says the front door is locked from the inside. He offers to go through the back, open the front door from inside, and let Curls in. McLean doesn't like it, but he nods. Robbins goes in. 8:22 p.m. The camera view shifts as Robbins enters the house through the back. The hallway is short. The air inside looks dim even though it's still daylight outside. Curtains block most of the sun. The living room appears furnished, but a lot of the furniture is still wrapped in protective plastic, like the residents recently moved in or were trying to keep things new. Robbins checks corners, moving slow. He focuses on a wardrobe closet and opens it quickly, gun raised. Inside is a child-sized synthesizer keyboard. Nothing else. He moves toward the kitchen. Space is tight. There aren't many places to hide. Cabinets and compartments seem too small for an adult. A large cake sits on a table. Chocolate icing slowly drips down one side, like it's been left out too long. Everything looks untouched, as if the party was paused mid-second. Robbins reaches a door near the stove. Front entry access, I assume. He unlocks it from inside. Officer Curls enters. They exchange short words. Robbins says he hasn't found anyone. McLean, outside, says he's observing the house. Curls moves upstairs. Robbins continues searching. Rooms feel empty and dead. No bodies. No movement. No residents. Then the footage abruptly cuts to black. After that, the body camera apparently returned to McLean's perspective outside. McLean is still in the backyard, walking back and forth, looking at the fence, the open back door, the windows. 2 minutes pass with nothing happening. Then a sound starts creeping into the audio. Soft at first, almost easy to miss. Whistling. A melody. Not slow, not frantic. Simple, old-fashioned, calm. McLean doesn't react at first. Then he does, like he's only just realized the sound isn't in his head. The whistling seems to be coming from outside the backyard fence, near the gate that leads toward the woods. The gate looks clean and untouched, which is probably why they didn't check it earlier. McLean walks down a short slope toward where the neighborhood meets the tree line. It's late evening now, the sun is dropping, throwing long shadows across bushes. The woods don't form a thick wall there. The trees are spaced out enough that you can see patches of ground and brush between them. McLean steps onto sun-dried earth and just stands there listening. His posture changes. His shoulders loosen. His breathing slows. He looks calmer, almost relaxed, like the whistling is pulling him into rhythm. Then the whistling stops. I'm not sure exactly when the figure appears, but suddenly I notice him, a man in the bushes. A white mask, bright against the shadows, staring straight into the camera. McLean's body stiffens, like he sees him too. And then the masked man disappears among the branches. There's a pause where McLean stands in silence. Then he starts walking forward anyway. The whistling swells again, louder now, steady and inviting. McLean pushes branches aside with both hands. The bushes are thick, firm enough that he has to apply force. Leaves crowd the lens. His hands vanish into green as he presses through. Then the brush opens into a small clearing, maybe 20 feet wide. The masked man stands there, not moving, not threatening in a normal way, just waiting. This time, the mask is clearly a rabbit mask. White, clean, almost theatrical. They stare at each other for maybe 10 seconds. Then the rabbit-masked man lifts one hand, then the other, and pivots 90 degrees to the left. His feet follow. He repeats it. Again. Again. He's dancing. Not like a normal person dancing at a party. The movements are smooth, precise, repetitive. Like a ritual. His ankles appear to rotate too far, at angles that don't look possible, but the motion stays fluid, like his body is built for it. His arms bend and shift through strange positions. His fingers move constantly, never still. It's like watching every muscle in a human body moving at once, but not randomly, like its own kind of language. It lasts maybe a minute. McLean doesn't look away, he steps closer. Then the rabbit stops. McLean raises his hands and claps. The clapping is weak and shaky, but it's clearly clapping, like he's applauding a performance. The rabbit bows, then points upward with one finger, like a performer saying, "One more trick." He produces a large kitchen knife, the same knife later logged as missing from the Patkin's house, and takes a throwing stance like someone about to toss a dart. The knife flies. It hits somewhere beneath the camera's view, but McLean makes a sound like pain. He collapses onto his back, and then, unbelievably, he claps again while lying there. Soft footsteps approach. McLean's moans become muffled, like something is lodged deep inside his mouth. Then they stop. Silence returns. The camera keeps recording for hours after that. Someone grabs McLean by the feet, and the dragging begins. Deeper into the forest. The sun goes down. The movement doesn't stop. Every so often you hear a faint cracking sound when his body catches on a root or stone and is yanked free without slowing. Over the radio, voices periodically call out for him. "Officer McLean, confirm your location." No reply. 11:21 p.m. The dragging stops. The camera faces upward. The sky is full of stars. So clear it doesn't look like a sky you'd see near a town. Then, suddenly, the stars disappear, replaced by complete darkness, like someone pulled a curtain across the lens of the night. 11:47 p.m., distant sounds begin. Not animal sounds, not wind, not movement, butchering sounds. The wet strain of muscle being separated, the hard knock of bone, the careful rhythm of cutting, like a blade working patiently, making neat pieces. A saw joins in at times. It's far enough that you can't see it, but close enough that you can hear each separate motion. 3:07 a.m. Only forest noise remains. Crickets. Occasional distant birds. End of recording. That was the video, and it changed the way I looked at true crime. I'd been interested in strange cases since I was maybe 13. Unsolved accidents, disappearances, violent crimes with no clear conclusion. Usually it feels like a puzzle. This didn't feel like a puzzle. It felt like something that should not exist in a file, because it shouldn't have happened at all. What shocked me most afterward was how little publicity this case had. How did it never hit national news? Not even regional. The only original sources I could find were the Cranbrook paper and a county paper, both small. I'm not trying to insult the local police. By all accounts, they worked hard and there was a major effort to solve it. But I cannot see a legitimate reason why this never became public. I'd never been in a police department archive before. It was intimidating and, to be honest, it scared me. I won't put names here. The legality of what I did is questionable enough as it is. The officers I dealt with were surprisingly friendly. The archive guy looked excited, like he'd never had someone ask about this case with genuine interest. It took him maybe 5 minutes to locate the video. I didn't ask to watch it again. I didn't even want to. After the video, I was shown a few other pieces of preserved material. The case is often called the Cranbrook Massacre. Even though no bodies were ever recovered, that's part of what makes it difficult to talk about. There's blood, there's recording, there's disappearance, and then a vacuum where the ending should be. The official analysis stayed consistent over the years. McLean and the Patkins family are considered the primary victims. The masked man in the rabbit mask was never identified from the video alone. Before I list the physical items, I want to share a short local newspaper snippet I was shown. It wasn't a full article, more like a quoted section. A local named Henry Matson described being part of a search group on the night of July 2nd into the early morning of July 3rd. Nearly a week after the incident, police considered the search desperate because of how far it would require them to go. They searched anyway. Henry said they reached a clearing about 20 miles from town right as the sun started coming up. For a few seconds, he felt relief because he thought maybe the family had simply gone camping. Then he saw the line of clothing, jeans, shorts, t-shirts, and a small dress, all laid on the grass in a line, all stained red enough that he called it a degenerate act and said he was done. He went home. That was it. No talk of bodies. No talk of blood trails, just clothes and stains and the feeling of something wrong. In theory, anything relevant should remain in police archives even after a case closes. This one was controversially closed 5 years later by court order, which is another detail that doesn't sit right. The archive guy told me some evidence was too gruesome, and I didn't push, but he did share the list of items still preserved. 1 audio recorder. 6 wrapped boxes, presents. 9 packs of clothes, 5 adults and 4 kids belonging to James, Octavia, Kaylee, Mary, Carl, Walter Patkins, and Christian Katniss Sophia Matson. 1 police uniform. 1 police body-worn camera. The presents were considered useless for investigation. Police tried to return them to relatives, but apparently there were no close relatives willing or able to accept anything. The only living family member mentioned was Chloe Patkins, 85, in a nursing home. Henry Matson refused to accept anything. The final piece I was allowed to hear was the audio extracted from that pink pony recorder found on the table. The scream recording itself took up almost the entire device, but a few smaller recordings were still there, some piano sounds, and 1 conversation that made my skin crawl more than the video did. A child's voice asks, "Are you the Easter Bunny?" "Hey," behind the tree. A window squeaks open. A man answers in a sweet, calm voice, maybe in his 30s. He speaks with a strange rhythm, like music is built into his speech. He says no, he isn't that bunny, but he's a fairy bunny in other ways, and then he drops a phrase in another language. After that, he continues slipping in bits of different languages: Portuguese, Spanish, Japanese, Danish, and others I couldn't identify. It doesn't sound like showing off. It sounds like habit, like his mind moves through languages the way other people move through rooms. The child asks if he does wishes. He says yes. She says it's her birthday tomorrow and she wants a dog. He asks if her parents will get one. She says her father has allergies, so she doesn't think so. He sounds genuinely sad for a moment, then asks if the child wants him to solve the allergy. She wants a big dog, someone to play with. He asks if an old dog is good enough. She hesitates, then says okay. He asks how long it will live. He says it depends how well they feed it, whether they hurt it. The child promises they won't. He asks if she wants to play with it in the trees, in the forest. She says yes. He says that makes everything easier. Then he says another phrase in another language that sounded like, "My fate is your fate." He says yes, but not today, and tells her not to worry. Then he says goodbye using the child's name, Mary, Maria. That was the recording. No bodies were ever found. Not then, not now, nearly a decade later. I asked what happened to the house. It still stands empty. People in town avoid it. Rumors move faster than memories fade, and in a small place, an empty house becomes a kind of warning sign. There's a small memorial for Officer McLean, only the second officer to die on duty in the department's history. Officers leave flowers there every June. They're required to contribute money for it, a quarter at minimum. Someone told me McLean had no family, so that memorial is the closest thing he has to being remembered properly. And that's the part that stays with me. The video shows a backyard that looks like a birthday party frozen in time. A toy recorder that can turn screaming on and off like a switch. A rabbit-masked man who whistles, dances, throws a knife and drags a trained officer into the woods as calmly as moving furniture. Then, nothing. No bodies. No closure. Just clothes in a clearing, blood, and an empty house no one wants to live in again. Story 4. It was one of those bland nothing days where I did what I always do when my brain feels empty. I lay in bed and doom-scrolled through random internet threads until my eyes started to sting. Somewhere in that endless scroll, I landed on a Reddit post that actually made me stop. A woman was asking about the man in the dream. You've probably heard of it. The story that's been floating around online for years about a strange man who keeps appearing in people's dreams. Supposedly, it started around 2006. Tons of people claim they've seen the same face, but no one's ever been able to identify him in real life. Normally, I would have rolled my eyes and kept scrolling. But this woman wasn't just saying she saw him. She said he showed her something, a vision, a ritual that could let you control your dreams. That part still didn't interest me much. People say a lot online. What got my attention was the money. She offered $100 to anyone who would send her a video of themselves performing the ritual. I'm not proud of how fast I messaged her, but $100 is $100, and I figured at worst it was a scam and I'd waste 10 minutes setting up some candles. At best, I'd get paid for doing something stupid and harmless and have a funny story to tell later. So I sent a message asking if the offer was real. She replied within seconds. She said it was for a class research paper. She said she was a college student and her name was Haley. I told her my name was Sam. I told her I was interested, but I wanted to know what the ritual actually involved. She responded quickly again, almost like she was waiting. She promised it didn't require blood or hurting herself. She said once she received the video, she'd send the $100 directly to my account. I asked what kind of class needed a dream ritual for a paper. She said it was a self-chosen research assignment. At the time, that sounded believable enough. College students pick weird topics all the time, and I kept reminding myself I wasn't sending her personal info beyond a payment method. I was still suspicious, but curiosity and boredom are a bad combination, and I was already hooked. So I asked for the steps. She replied almost instantly with a detailed message. I saved it, and I can still remember the wording because I read it out loud later and laughed at how cliché it sounded. Before going to bed, you must place 4 mirrors in a cross-like pattern. Each mirror should face the bed, and the bed should sit in the center of the room. Place unlit candles in front of each mirror. Light only 3 candles, leaving 1 unlit. Sit on the bed and stare into the mirror with the unlit candle, and speak aloud. Breach the gap of soul and mind, bend the will that is mine. Then lay in the bed and sleep. I stared at my phone and actually laughed. Mirrors, candles, a chant. It sounded like something from a cheap horror movie. something a teenager would write to scare their friends at a sleepover. But it was also simple, and it was also $100. So I thought, whatever. I'll do it, I'll film it, I'll send it. Worst case, I don't get paid. Best case, I get paid, and I get to joke about it with my friends. I told her I'd do it and send the video in the morning. All she replied with was, okay. That was it. One word. It was weird because she'd been so fast and talkative before, but I shrugged it off. I checked the time. 10:42 p.m. In 7 hours, I had to be up for school. I sighed and started getting ready, telling myself this was dumb and I was dumb for even entertaining it. But hey, dumb doesn't always mean dangerous. Candles were easy. My mom kept a bunch in a drawer for power outages. Finding 4 mirrors was harder, but the message never said what kind. So I got creative. 2 small bathroom mirrors, 1 full-length mirror I kept in my room, and 1 little handheld mirror my sister used for makeup. I set them in a cross-like shape around my bed. The full-length mirror faced the bed directly, so I decided that would be the one with the unlit candle, since it felt like the main mirror. I placed the candles, then lit 3 of them. The room looked wrong with that kind of lighting. Warm but unsettling. Shadows bending in corners where corners shouldn't bend. I dug out an old GoPro I hadn't used in years, balanced it so it could see the setup, and hit record. Then I sat on the bed and stared into the mirror with the unlit candle. I tried not to giggle. I really did. Breach the gap of soul and mind, I said, and my voice sounded too loud. Bend the will that is mine. I remember thinking it felt embarrassing, like saying it would make something laugh at me. Then I turned over and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Not just tired, wrong. Like my brain was full of wet sand. My limbs felt heavy. My eyes burned. I looked at my alarm clock. 5:42 a.m., I dragged myself to the bathroom and did what I always do on autopilot. Scrolled through my phone while half awake, then showered, got dressed, moved like a zombie through my routine. It wasn't until I was fully dressed that I remembered the ritual, and I felt stupid all over again. I took the GoPro SD card out, uploaded the video to my computer, and sent it to Haley. She replied instantly, thanking me over and over. Then, just like she promised, the money hit my account. I stared at my banking app in shock. She actually paid me. That's when the whole thing stopped feeling like a joke. I thanked her back and went to school, trying not to overthink it. The day went normal. Breakfast, classes, lunch, more classes. I started to relax. Started to tell myself it was just a goofy way to make some money. After school, I went to the soccer field for practice. Everything felt normal there, too. We took shots on goal, ran drills, joked around, did the usual stuff. At the end, we formed our usual huddle, and the coach started talking about the next practice. I was looking at him when I noticed something was off. Not big, not obvious, just a tiny detail that didn't match. I stared harder, trying to figure out what it was, and then, right in front of my eyes, my coach's face shifted. Not like he changed expression, like his entire face became someone else's, a stranger. My breath caught in my throat. My lungs stopped working. I looked around the huddle, and suddenly I couldn't recognize anyone. Their faces felt unfamiliar, like my brain had lost the ability to connect features to names. I stumbled backward, panicking, grabbing at my throat like air was gone from the world. It felt like I didn't have lungs anymore. Like breathing was something I'd forgotten how to do. The edges of my vision darkened, and I tipped backward into black. I woke up with a jolt, gasping like air was rare. I lay there, staring at my ceiling, heart hammering. It was a dream, I told myself. It had to be. But it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like I lived a full day. A whole normal day that ended in something impossible. Then my eyes drifted to the mirror in front of my bed. And that's when fear really settled in. What if the ritual worked? What if that wasn't just a nightmare? What if it was the result? I grabbed my phone and texted Haley. Hey, I did the ritual and something weird happened. Please text me once you see this. No reply. So I got ready for school anyway, trying to keep my mind calm. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself I was letting internet horror nonsense infect my brain. School and practice went by without incident. That gave me hope, real hope. I started thinking maybe the first dream day was just my mind playing tricks. After school, I went home, changed, and got ready for work. I work at a grocery store. Nothing fancy. I collect carts, clean around the parking lot, do basic stuff nobody else wants to do. I've worked there long enough that I could walk the place blindfolded. I clocked in. I worked my shift. Everything felt normal. Then I went into the bathroom, and my heart dropped because the bathroom had 3 stalls. There had always been 1 stall and 2 urinals. Always. For 3 years, I knew it the way you know your own bedroom layout. You don't have to think about it. But there they were. 3 stalls. I stared at them with my mouth hanging open, then slowly turned toward the mirror over the sink. I looked at myself and understood, all at once, with a sick rush of certainty. I was dreaming again. I pinched myself, slapped my own face, dug my nails into my palm hard enough that it should have hurt. Nothing woke me up. A guy walked in and stared at me like I was insane. I bolted out of the bathroom and into the store, except it wasn't a store anymore. It was a restaurant. Cables, booths, a smell of grease and coffee, people in different clothes, different lighting, different air. My head spun. My coworker Mary, except she wasn't my coworker anymore, not really, walked up to me and asked what was wrong. I looked at her and whispered the only thing I could say. I'm sleeping and I can't wake up. The moment the words left my mouth, the entire room changed. Everyone stood up at once, chairs scraping, and they all turned toward me like they'd been waiting for me to say it. Their faces split into wide smiles, stretched too far, too perfect. Joyful and cruel at the same time. Mary smiled too, all of them smiling, all of them staring. I screamed. Then I jolted awake in my bed, still screaming, drenched in sweat. The clock read 5:42 a.m. Again, I lay there shaking, afraid to move. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. Haley. Her message read, "Hey, how is it going? It's been a couple of days and I haven't heard from you. Are you doing okay?" I stared at it, confused, because it had only been 1 day. I blinked. And suddenly I was back in bed again, staring at the ceiling like I'd never picked my phone up at all. I reached for it, hands shaking. My inbox was empty. No message, no conversation, nothing. I started crying hard because I didn't know what was real anymore. A couple hours passed like that, shaking, crying, staring at the ceiling, until I forced myself to get up and go to work. I watched everything obsessively, counted things, checked details, confirmed signs, made sure the world stayed consistent. The day passed without anything changing. I felt relief so intense it almost made me dizzy. That night I went home and tried to unwind. I took a long, hot shower, letting the steam loosen the tension in my body. I told myself I was done with this, that it was over, that I'd survived whatever stupid mental spiral I'd created by playing along with a fake ritual. I stepped out of the shower, dried off, and went to brush my teeth. I looked up. There was a mirror in the bathroom that wasn't mine. I froze so hard I dropped my comb. I hadn't brought any of the ritual mirrors back into the bathroom. I'd left them in my room. I knew that. I knew it like I knew my own name. My stomach turned cold. I blinked, and I was back in bed again. The alarm clock read 5:42 a.m. I lay there for what felt like hours, too scared to cry, too scared to move, waiting for the next shift in reality like it was a punch I couldn't dodge. Then my phone rang. Mary. I answered and heard her asking why I never showed up for work. I apologized, told her I wasn't feeling well, told her I needed sleep. I lowered the phone, and saw it still lying on the floor beside my bed. I stared at it. My hands started trembling so hard I couldn't control them. That was when I snapped. I jumped up and started destroying everything in my room. I smashed mirrors, knocked candles over, ripped sheets off my bed. I didn't care if I cut myself. I didn't care if I broke anything. I just wanted it to stop. When I finally collapsed on the floor, panting and crying, I waited for whatever came next. And of course, I woke up again. 5:42 a.m., I screamed until my throat felt raw, until it felt like every blood vessel in my face would burst. Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I messaged Haley one question. How do I end it? She replied instantly. You must find the man. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no help, just an instruction, like she was reading from a script. Find the man. So I did. Or I tried to. I moved through places that kept changing. I opened doors that looked familiar. My bedroom door, my front door, the grocery store back entrance. And every time I stepped through, the world on the other side was wrong. A hallway that didn't exist. A street that bent the wrong way. A field where there should have been a parking lot. I searched until my hope started to crumble. Then I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the woods, staring at me. He wore a wild grin like he was enjoying this. Like he'd been waiting. He ran. I ran after him. Branches slapped my face. The ground was uneven and wet. I kept shouting without knowing what I was shouting. I chased him until my lungs burned, until my legs shook. Then I stumbled and fell. When I pushed myself up, he was gone. I stood there breathing hard, looking around in the dim light, and that's when I saw the cabin. A small, old log cabin that hadn't been there a second ago. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct screamed not to. But I also didn't have another choice. I opened the door. Inside was bigger than it should have been. The space felt stretched, like the cabin was lying about its size. The room was mostly empty except for a desk. 3 figures sat at it. One was a woman facing me, head lowered, face hidden. The other 2 were children with their backs to me, sitting side by side like students waiting to be graded. I stood in the doorway and whispered, "What the hell?" The children turned around slowly. Their eyes were pitch black, not dark brown, not shadowed, black like holes. My breath vanished. My lungs locked again, that same horrible feeling like air had been removed from the room. Then the woman raised her head. She wore a mask, smooth, pitch black, featureless except for the shape of where eyes should be. No expression, just emptiness. And I heard a voice in my head, clear as if someone spoke directly into my brain. You have to wake up. I opened my eyes. This time felt different. This time felt real. The clock read 5:43 a.m., not 5:42. I stared at it like it was proof of something holy. Then I looked around my room. All 4 mirrors were still there. All 4 candles were lit. Every candle. That wasn't how I set it up. I had left one unlit. My stomach tightened as I forced myself to get up. I put everything away anyway. Mirrors, candles, all of it. Hands shaking the entire time. I didn't trust the world, but I acted like I did because I didn't know what else to do. That was 3 days ago. Everything has been normal since. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I feel that same dread creeping up. Because it felt normal before, too. It felt real before, too. And the scariest part is this. Something still feels out of place. Like there's one detail I'm missing. One crack in the story that would prove this is still a dream. I'm going to try to sleep now. Hopefully I wake up and see this post in the morning. Story 5, the body never stopped twitching. That was the first thing he noticed. Not the blood, not the knife. Not the way the man's mouth hung open toward the night sky as if he were trying to scream but had forgotten how. It was the twitching. The body lay in the alley between the tall metal buildings of Brooklyn, jerking in small, broken movements. One arm kicked against the pavement, Fingers opened and closed. The legs gave little spasms, heels scraping through the spreading blood. Above it stood the man who had done it. He did not know the victim. They had never even seen each other before that night. And yet, there they were, one dead on the ground, and the other standing over him with a knife slipping from his fingers. The blade hit the pavement with a wet metallic sound. He stared at it. Then he stared back at the body. The man on the ground should have been still by now. That was how it worked, wasn't it? A knife in the chest, a collapse, blood, then silence. But this body kept moving. Its mouth opened wider, pulling into a silent scream. The throat shifted as if words were trapped under the skin. The eyes stared upward, reflecting tiny pieces of city light and stars that could barely be seen past the rooftops. The killer could not move. His mind had emptied. There was no fear at first, no regret, no plan. Only the sight of those twitching fingers and the strange thought that the body was not finished with itself yet. Someone shouted behind him. Then more voices. Police. He heard them telling him to freeze. That part was easy. He was already frozen. They yelled at him to get on the ground, to raise his hands, to step back from the body. Their flashlights flashed across his face, the knife, the blood, the dead man's twitching limbs. But he could not obey. He could not stop looking. The body convulsed again, harder this time. The shoulders lifted from the pavement and dropped back down with a soft slap. Blood bubbled from the wound in its chest. One officer shouted louder. The killer blinked. That was all. The last thing he saw was the dead man's mouth stretching open as if one final scream was about to come out. Then the grip of a pistol slammed into the side of his skull. Pain burst white. The alley tilted. The city lights folded into darkness, and everything went black. By the time the paramedics arrived, the police had sealed off the alley. The crowd had gathered anyway. People leaned from apartment windows. A few stood behind the yellow tape, holding phones, whispering to each other, trying to see past the officers. New York always found an audience for tragedy. The body was lifted onto a stretcher and covered with a yellow tarp. Even beneath the tarp, it moved. Not much. Just enough. A ripple under the plastic. A twitch of one covered foot. A slow, stiff arch of the back. One paramedic noticed, but said nothing. He only tightened the straps and pushed the stretcher toward the ambulance. The other paramedic kept his eyes forward, face pale but calm, as if he had already decided not to think about what he was seeing. Blood leaked from under the tarp and dripped onto the pavement. A dark line followed them out of the alley. The ambulance doors opened. The stretcher slid inside. The doors shut. For a moment, the sirens screamed through the city, red and white lights splashing across windows, parked cars, brick walls, and the faces of people who would talk about this for a week before forgetting it. Inside the ambulance, the body shook under the tarp. The two paramedics sat in front, separated from the back by a small window. One drove. The other stared ahead, holding a clipboard but not writing anything. Behind them, the body moved. Its fingers pressed against the tarp from underneath, stretching the plastic into small points. Its feet kicked once, then again. The chest rose and fell, though no breath passed through the mouth. If movement meant life, they should have saved him. If twitching meant pain, they should have helped him. But the monitor stayed silent. No heartbeat, no pulse, no breath. Dead. And still moving. The ambulance reached the hospital without the siren by the end. The lights were shut off before it pulled into the bay, as if the crew wanted to arrive quietly. The back doors opened. The stretcher came out. The body squirmed under the tarp. The paramedics pushed it through the automatic doors into the white brightness of the hospital corridor. The motor above the entrance hummed softly as the doors opened and closed behind them. They did not rush. That was strange. No one shouted. No one called for emergency staff. No one gave orders. They pushed the body through the halls at the pace of men taking laundry to be washed. The wheels squeaked over the polished floor. They passed waiting rooms full of tired people, nurses at desks, Doctors moving between rooms, children leaning against parents, old men coughing into tissues. No one looked too closely at the stretcher. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe hospitals trained people not to stare. Or maybe the hospital already knew what was coming. At the end of a long hallway, the paramedics turned into a room with a single white table in the center. The lights above were sharp and cold. The walls were clean. A glass viewing window overlooked the room from one side. They shut the door behind them. Then they removed the tarp. The dead man's face had changed. Blood ran from his eyes in thin, dark streams down his temples and into his hair. His mouth worked open and closed, pushing up clots of blood that rolled over his lips and slid down his chin. His skin had gone gray around the wound in his chest, but the rest of him looked almost flushed, almost alive. His body twisted on the table. The paramedics stared down at him without emotion. They did not speak. They strapped his wrists, then his ankles, then his chest. The body jerked harder when the last strap was tightened, but the table held him down. The paramedics left. A surgeon entered. He wore blue scrubs, gloves. His eyes were tired but calm. He did not look surprised by the body's movements. He did not look afraid of the blood coming from the dead man's eyes. He picked up a scalpel. For a moment, he stood over the body, studying it. Then he made the first cut. The blade entered just below the rib cage. Blood welled up immediately. Too much and too dark. It spilled over the sides of the incision and ran down the man's stomach in thick lines. The surgeon kept cutting anyway. Down, down, past the navel. Then the blade turned sharply to the right. He carved across, then back upward, creating a flap of skin. With careful hands, he lifted the loose section away and placed it beside the body. Underneath was ruin. The intestines were not arranged as they should have been. They had twisted together into a tight knot no larger than a tennis ball, slick and pulsing faintly. The pancreas had turned black and hard, like a lump of coal. The liver looked bruised and swollen. Tiny veins moved across the organs like worms beneath the surface. Still, the surgeon did not react. He had seen enough death to become almost empty around it. He put the scalpel down and reached for another tool, a long metal hook. He slid it under the lowest part of the rib cage. Then, with one sharp motion, he pulled. The rib cage tore open, bone cracked, skin split. Blood sprayed across the walls in a thick red sheet. The surgeon flinched but did not step back. Blood covered his mask, his gloves, his face shield. He wiped the shield with one forearm, clearing just enough space to see. The dead man's heart was moving. It bounced inside the opened chest cavity, not beating, bouncing. It struck the torn edges of the rib cage again and again, faster each time. The movement became frantic, almost joyful, like the organ was trying to escape the body that had failed it. The surgeon leaned closer. The heart slammed against a sharp shard of bone. It split open. It shot upward in a hot red stream, hitting the ceiling, the light fixture, the viewing glass. The surgeon stumbled back as the pressure increased. Then came two small pops. The dead man's eyes burst. Twin fountains of blood sprayed straight up from the empty sockets. More blood poured from the mouth, the opened chest, the wound in the heart, the incision across the stomach. It did not slow. It did not make sense. The table overflowed first. Blood spilled onto the floor, spreading in all directions. It ran around the surgeon's shoes, then over them. It climbed his ankles. The liquid was too thick, too heavy, moving like it had weight beyond water. The surgeon tried to step back. His foot would not lift. He looked down. The blood had wrapped around his legs. Not like rope, like mud, like something alive pretending to be liquid. For the first time, his calm broke. His eyes widened behind the shield. He pulled harder, but the blood held him. It rose past his ankles, then his shins, then his knees. The dead body on the table thrashed against the straps, mouth still opening in that silent scream. The surgeon shouted. No one came. The blood reached his waist. He grabbed the edge of the table, but his gloves slipped. His legs buckled, he fell forward into the rising red flood, face hitting the surface with a splash. He tried to push himself up. The blood forced itself into his mouth, his nose, his lungs. He choked, hands clawing at the slick floor, but the liquid kept rising. Past the table, past the viewing window, past the lights. The surgeon's back pressed against the ceiling. His hands opened and closed once. Then he stopped moving. Outside the room, the hallway lights flickered. The viewing glass went red from the inside. At first, people thought it was an accident, a burst pipe, a broken tank, some strange medical disaster inside one sealed room. Then blood began seeping under the door. Slowly, then faster. It ran across the hallway tiles, thick and dark, filling the cracks, spreading around shoes, wheels, and chair legs. A nurse screamed. A doctor slipped and fell. The doors of nearby rooms shook in their frames as red pressure filled the spaces beyond them. Windows turned crimson one by one, like eyes filling with blood. Inside each room, patients began to scream. Then their screams became muffled. Then they stopped. The blood moved through the hospital with impossible purpose. It flooded surgery suites. It rose in elevators. It seeped beneath locked doors in the children's ward. Parents held their children on beds and chairs, lifting them higher and higher as the red tide climbed the walls. Small hands pressed against glass. Adult hands pressed over small mouths. The blood rose past shoes, knees, waists, chests. Every room became a coffin. In the waiting room, people pushed toward the exits, but the doors would not open. They were packed shoulder to shoulder, strangers holding strangers, everyone suddenly united by the same terrible realization. No one was coming. No ambulance. No rescue team. No police. Outside, the city continued. Traffic moved. People walked past the hospital without looking up. Inside, the blood rose floor by floor. The dead man on the table still twitched at the center of it all. His mouth stayed open. His empty eyes continued to pour. And somewhere far away, in a police station holding cell, the man who had stabbed him woke with a bandaged head and dried blood under his fingernails. He heard no sirens, no footsteps outside his cell. Only dripping. Slow. Steady. Getting closer, he sat up, heart pounding, and saw a dark red line creeping under the door. For the first time since the alley, he found his voice. He screamed. And this time, the dead thing screamed with him. Story 6. I knew the risks when I signed up for the procedure. That is the part I need to say first, because I don't want anyone thinking I walked into that hospital blind. I knew it was experimental. I knew there were no promises. I knew there was a real chance I could fall into a coma and never wake up again. I knew I could die on the table. I knew I could come back wrong, if I came back at all. But by that point, none of those possibilities scared me as much as continuing to live the life I already had. My life had been falling apart for years, not all at once, not in one dramatic disaster, but piece by piece. First my mother, then my father, then the house, then the small routines that used to hold me together. Friends stopped calling after a while because grief makes people uncomfortable, especially when it doesn't go away quickly enough for them. People can handle mourning for a few weeks, maybe a few months. But when years pass and you are still broken, they start treating you like you are choosing it. Maybe I was. All I had left were memories. The best ones were always the same. Mom baking blueberry pie in the kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, the windows open, the smell of butter, sugar, berries, and warm crust filling the whole house. Her humming softly while she worked, flour dusting the front of her shirt. Dad outside with me, putting up or repairing something around the yard. Sometimes it was the fence. Sometimes a loose porch step. Sometimes a shelf in the garage. But my favorite memory was the tire swing. Dad and I were in the backyard beside the old tree, working with rope and wood and tools I was too young to understand properly. I remember the smell of fresh sawdust. I remember the rough feeling of the rope in my hands. I remember Dad pretending I was helping more than I actually was. I remember Mom calling through the kitchen window that the pie was almost done. Every Sunday had some version of that. Mom made the pie. Dad and I fixed something. The house smelled like blueberries and sawdust. I dreamt of those days almost every night, and eventually sleep became the only thing I looked forward to. I would drag myself through the day just to get back to them. In my dreams, they were alive. Mom would smile when I came into the kitchen. Dad would clap a hand on my shoulder and ask me to hold the ladder steady. The house would be warm again. The world would make sense again. I tried sleeping pills once, hoping I could spend whole days there, but the medication changed the dreams. It made them dull, blurry, and unreachable. Sometimes it stopped them completely. I woke from those medicated sleeps feeling more empty than before, so I found another way. I got a job at a warehouse. It was brutal, repetitive work, but that was exactly what I needed. I spent my days lifting, loading, moving, stacking, sweating, and wearing my body down until I could barely stand by the time I got home. If I pushed myself hard enough, I would collapse into bed and fall asleep almost instantly. And if I was lucky, I would dream of them. For a while, that was enough. Then I heard about the project. I won't say too much about how I found it. I signed enough non-disclosure agreements to know better, and honestly, I still don't fully understand what they were doing. It had something to do with memory reconstruction, dream immersion, and neural stimulation. A way to send the mind back into preserved memories and let a person experience them again with full sensory detail. Not just remembering, living. At least that was the idea. The danger was obvious. The doctors explained that the brain was not designed to be forced into its own past. Memory is not a recording. It is unstable, emotional, and incomplete. If the process worked, I might experience what felt like a real return to a specific point in my life. If it failed, my mind could collapse into a coma, reject the stimulation, or die from the shock. They told me all of that. I listened. I signed anyway. The smell of Mom's blueberry pie and Dad's sawdust had blinded me to every warning. Before they even considered me for the program, I had to go through months of paperwork and mandatory therapy. They needed to prove, at least on paper, that I wasn't making the decision impulsively. They asked if I was suicidal. They asked if I understood the risks. They asked if I had a support system. They asked if I believed my family would really be alive in the memory, or if I understood that the procedure was only recreating what my brain stored. I answered the way they wanted me to. Sometimes honestly. Sometimes not. There were disclosures I barely read, liability forms, consent forms, non-disclosure agreements, medical releases, psychological evaluations, and recordings of me saying I understood I might not survive. By the end, my signature felt less like my name and more like a little ritual I performed to get closer to the only thing I wanted. The night before the procedure, I dreamt of my 12th birthday. It was at one of those pizza places where kids were basically allowed to gamble with tokens. Not Chuck E. Cheese, though it was the same idea. This place was called Price's Pizza Palace. It wasn't a chain, just some local spot with arcade machines, cheap prizes, sticky floors, and a giant cartoon king painted on the wall holding a slice of pizza like a sword. I had begged my parents to take me there for my birthday for 5 years in a row. That year, they finally did. In the dream, I remembered the air conditioning hitting my face the moment we walked inside. I remembered the smell of cooked pepperoni, hot cheese, soda syrup, and carpet that had absorbed years of spilled drinks. I remembered Dad laughing while Mom told me not to spend all my tokens in the first 10 minutes. I remembered feeling like the whole place existed just for me. Then I woke up, and the dread was already there. It sat in my chest before I even opened my eyes. I hadn't felt anything like it since the day I got the call about Dad. Not sadness exactly, not fear in a clean way. It was heavier than that. A deep instinctive warning that something was wrong, that I was walking towards something I should turn away from. I tried to brush it off. I showered, got dressed, brushed my teeth, made coffee I barely drank. Every movement felt slow, like time had thickened around me. Each second stretched too long. My hands shook when I tied my shoes. I told myself nerves were normal. I told myself anyone would feel scared before an experimental brain procedure, but the dread did not feel like ordinary fear. It felt like someone inside me was begging me not to go. I got on the city bus and headed toward University Hospital. The closer we got, the worse the feeling became. I sat near the middle of the bus, staring out the window as the city passed in dull gray streaks. It had rained earlier and the roads were still wet. People got on and off. A man argued softly into his phone. A woman bounced a baby on her knee. Two students laughed in the back like nothing in the world could ever truly hurt them. I envied them. When the bus stopped in front of the hospital, I didn't move. The doors opened with a hiss. People stood and walked past me. I watched them step onto the sidewalk, one after another, while I sat frozen against the textured upholstery. For a moment, I almost stayed on. I could have ridden the bus past the hospital. I could have gone home. I could have called and said I changed my mind. The doctors would probably have been relieved. My therapist would have called it progress. But then I thought of the rest of my life. The warehouse. The empty apartment. The long days lived only for sleep. The mornings after dreams when waking felt like losing my family all over again. What is death really but a deeper sleep? That thought had become dangerous inside me. Comforting, too. I peeled myself from the seat with all the strength I had left. "Thanks," I muttered to the driver. He nodded without looking back. I stepped onto the wet concrete. A light drizzle fell, so I pulled my hood up and walked toward the crosswalk. The hospital stood across the street, white and gray and shining with glass. The smell of rain rose from the pavement. I waited for the little white walking figure to appear. The dread and my resolve fought inside me. One part of me screamed to turn back. The other whispered that I had already been dead for years. The white walking man lit up. I crossed. Inside the hospital, the first thing I smelled was sterility. Disinfectant, cold air, polished floors, and that faint chemical smell every hospital has, as if the building itself is trying to convince you death has never happened there. I checked in at the front desk. The receptionist's name tag read, Mary. "If you want to take a seat right over there," she said, pointing to a group of chairs across the room. "Dr. Lee will be out in a few minutes." I thanked her and sat down. The dread bubbled up again while I waited. To distract myself, I picked up a magazine from the side table. It was one of those home decoration magazines my mother used to collect. That alone almost broke me. Mom had kept stacks of them in her closet. Half the space was filled with old magazines, much to Dad's annoyance. He used to complain that one day the pile would collapse and bury us all. She always said she needed ideas, even though she rarely copied anything from them. I remembered the smell of the old pages as they yellowed with age. The oldest ones were always at the bottom, turning a light orange color, brittle enough that they might crumble if you folded them wrong. Once, when I was a kid, I carefully pulled one from the bottom of the stack, trying not to topple the whole thing. I opened it and breathed in that dusty, rotting paper smell like it was something precious. The sound of footsteps pulled me back. Dr. Lee stood in front of me with a clipboard in his hand. "Marcus," he said with a polite smile, "how are you this morning?" I stood and shook his hand. "I'm all right," I said. "You know how it is." His smile faded a little. He looked at me for a few seconds longer than necessary. There was pity in his face. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something personal, something outside the official script. But he didn't. "Right this way," he said. I followed him down a long white hallway lit by fluorescent lights. There was no small talk. Our footsteps sounded too loud. Everything was too clean, too bright, too final. He led me into a room where nurses and assistants were waiting. "Have a seat there," Dr. Lee said, pointing to the bed. "We'll start with vitals," took blood, swabbed my mouth, placed sensors on my skin, attached wires, checked my eyes, scanned things, recorded things, and explained things I didn't bother remembering. Everyone was kind. Everyone was professional. That almost made it worse. Finally, the room cleared. leaving only Dr. Lee and me. He let out a slow breath. "Okay," he said. "Now that the boring parts are over, we need to talk one last time." I already knew what was coming. He sat on a backless rolling chair and looked at me seriously. "I'm going to ask you this once more. Take as much time as you need. There is no shame in changing your mind. Are you sure you want to do this? This is experimental. There are no guaranteed results. It could leave you permanently brain dead. It could kill you." Before that morning, my answer would have come instantly. Now, the dread was almost unbearable. It felt like a hand around my heart. I looked into Dr. Lee's eyes and thought about the rest of my life if I walked away. I saw myself growing older in an empty apartment, working until my body broke, sleeping only to visit ghosts. I saw decades of mornings where I woke up and lost them again. "I'm sure," I said. My voice cracked at the end. "Please." And just like that, the dread disappeared completely. That should have scared me more than anything. The procedure room ceiling was made of white tiles with tiny speckled holes. Long fluorescent lights broke them into bright rectangles. I stared up at them as they wheeled my bed into place. Doctors spoke quietly around me. Metal instruments clicked together. Machines hummed. Someone adjusted something near my head. Someone else checked the IV in my arm. A nurse with a sweet, calm voice leaned close. "This is going to put you to sleep," she said. She injected something into the IV. Almost immediately, my eyes grew heavy. Warmth spread through my body. Not the warmth of a blanket, but something deeper, like being lowered into peaceful water. My muscles softened. My thoughts slowed. The sounds around me stretched and faded. I slipped under, but not all the way. I could still sense the doctors moving around me. Their voices drifted in and out, muffled and distant. It felt like sleep paralysis, except peaceful. I floated in a soft, warm nothing with no fear, no grief, no need. For a while, there was only calm. Then I felt something tug at my feet. Colors flashed in front of me. Not images, just colors. Bright, violent, shapeless. Then nothing. Another tug came, stronger this time. More colors. Emotions rushed through me without warning. 1 second I was laughing, the next I was sobbing, then I was furious, then terrified, then filled with love so strong it hurt. The tugging grew harder. The colors became brighter. A final pull seized my legs, so violent I thought my body would tear in half. Then I was falling, down through flashing colors, down through memory, down through something deep and dark that had opened beneath me. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then the falling stopped. When I opened them, I was staring at a Sports Illustrated poster taped to the ceiling. For a second, I thought I was confused from the drugs. Then I turned my head. I was not in the hospital. I was in a bedroom. My bedroom, my old bedroom. My PlayStation 2 sat in front of the TV. The old yellowed computer was on the light-colored wooden desk. Clothes were scattered across the floor. The room smelled like teenage boy odor, old carpet, deodorant, and dust. I sat up slowly. The reflection in the TV showed a teenage boy with acne across his face. Me. Younger me. My breath caught. I ran to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. There I was. My face rounder, softer. No lines under my eyes, no tired adult weight in my expression. I touched my cheeks, my jaw, my hair, my skin. I smiled for the first time in years. It worked. Somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Then, I remembered. Mom, Dad. I rushed out of the bathroom and nearly tripped down the stairs. The house smelled like blueberry pie. "Mom!" I shouted as I crashed into the kitchen table. The kitchen was empty. The pie was in the oven. I could smell it baking. A bowl sat on the counter with traces of filling still inside. The rolling pin was out. Flour dusted the surface near the sink. She had been there. She had to have been there. Dad? The shed door was wide open. It swung gently in the breeze, slamming against the wall in a slow rhythm. Bump, bump, bump. The sound made my stomach tighten. I walked toward it. Bump, bump. The smell of gasoline grew stronger with every step. Bump, bump. I reached the doorway. Inside, the lawnmower sat in the middle of the shed. Its gas cap was on the dirt floor. A gas can lay tipped over, still dripping small drops into the ground. Dad would never leave it like that. Never. I backed out of the shed as dread returned, cold and familiar. Where were they? Mom's pie was still baking. Dad had been working in the shed. They had been here. This was the memory. This was the day. They were supposed to be here. I searched the whole house. Every room, every closet, the basement, the garage, the yard. Nothing. No mom, no dad, no voices. No laughter, just the smell of blueberry pie and gasoline. I picked up the corded phone in the kitchen, but then I realized I didn't remember anyone's number. Not really. Not the numbers from back then. Years of cell phones had erased them from me. Then I thought of the Lawrences next door. Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence had always been kind. My parents said if I ever needed help and they weren't around, I should go there. I ran across the yard and knocked. Knock. No answer. I knocked again. Mr. Lawrence? Mrs. Lawrence? They told me if I ever needed help. I stopped in the kitchen. A gallon of milk lay on the floor, its contents spilled everywhere and a white splash across the tiles. The house was silent except for a faint buzzing sound from somewhere in the back. I moved slowly down the hall, checking each doorway. The buzzing grew louder. Finally, I opened the bathroom door. An electric beard trimmer was on the floor, still running. I picked it up and turned it off. Tiny black and gray hairs covered the sink. The silence after I shut it off felt louder than the buzzing. I searched their house too. No one, only the spilled milk, only the trimmer, only signs of people interrupted in the middle of ordinary life. I went back home. There was nothing else to do but wait. I sat at the kitchen table until the oven timer rang. The sound made me flinch. I took the pie out of the oven and placed it on the table in front of me. It looked perfect. Golden crust, blueberry filling bubbling at the edges. The smell filled the kitchen exactly the way it used to. But Mom was not there to smile at it. Dad was not there to sneak the first bite. I sat there for hours. The pie cooled. The light outside faded. No one came home. Eventually, I went upstairs. My mind felt hazy and slow. I lay in my old bed and stared at the half-naked woman on the poster above me. Tears slid down my cheeks and into the pillow. The house was silent except for my quiet sobbing. I closed my eyes and prayed I would wake up in the real world. But when I opened them again, morning sunlight shone across the same poster. I was still there, still in my childhood bedroom, still alone. And from downstairs, the kitchen timer began ringing again, even though I had already taken the pie out hours ago.